So good morning again. Thank you for being here. My name is Paula Glover, and I am the President and CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy, and I want to welcome you to our Energy Brain Trust, the impact of energy on the global economy and communities of color. We are going to really have what I hope will be a dynamic discussion and an interesting discussion, and while sometimes you like large audiences, I actually think having a smaller group gives us all an opportunity to ask any kind of question we'd like to ask. You'll see that there will be a microphone right here in the middle, so as a matter of format, we will have a couple of opening statements and keynote addresses. We'll have our panel come up to the dais. I will start with a question, but I invite you not to wait until I'm finished asking questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand. Somehow signal to me that you have a question, and we're going to just keep doing that until we get to 12 o'clock. Does that work for everybody? Okay. So at some point, what we're hoping, and Congresswoman has a very busy schedule this morning, that she'll be able to come in and give us some remarks. I know she's rushing around during this week, but if I ask us to just everyone to take a break for a moment, it is because we want to obviously accommodate the Congresswoman since she's really the reason that we're here, and allow her to provide us some comments. To start, I would like to invite Karen Atkinson from the U.S. Department of Energy to come up and join us. Karen is a Deputy Director of the Office of Minority, Business, and Economic Development. Come on, Karen.
Good morning. How is everyone? Great. Well, it's an honor to participate here today in this important event. I'd like to thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee and Paula also for inviting me here today to speak on this panel. My name is Karen Atkinson, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Minority Business and Economic Development at the U.S. Department of Energy. Our office focuses on expanding business opportunities in the energy sector and also in DOE innovation and entrepreneurship programs. The theme of the panel today, the Energy Brain Trust, is very timely given the transformation of our energy sector and the challenges our nation faces in building infrastructure, capacity, and energy security. I'm going to start today just by talking a little bit about the rapidly changing energy landscape and what this means for diverse businesses and diverse communities. The U.S. has become the world's leading producer of oil and natural gas combined. At the same time, the composition of our energy demand has also evolved, with petroleum consumption flat and the use of natural gas and renewable energy growing. The shale and oil and gas markets have also provided new diversification opportunities for industry and for diverse communities. Further, the U.S. is undergoing a dynamic energy sector transformation resulting from advances in energy technologies that have reduced the power of renewable energy costs and also enable us to economically extract fossil resources that were one time out of reach. These trends are boons for America, its consumers, and diverse communities. The pace of change within the nation's demographic makeup and also the energy landscape demands better utilization of both our economic and human capital resources. To meet the nation's energy demands, there must be a concerted effort to promote diverse participation in both the energy and innovation economy. We can do this by cultivating entrepreneurship opportunities, growing businesses, and developing the talent for the energy workforce. This means reaching out to the underserved populations and providing more opportunities to grow energy sector businesses. Increased participation by the diverse energy business community will be vital to achieving our goal of energy dominance. That's why organizations such as the Congressional Black Foundation are so important. Your work is key because you equip people with knowledge, resources, and networks they need to grow thriving businesses. Our country's changing demographics provide an opportunity to bring underserved and diverse participation into the energy economy. Last year, the department launched an initiative to help us do that. Our office, the Office of Minority Business and Economic Development, launched a flagship energy sector business opportunity program to connect diverse businesses with the energy industry. These workshops are held in regions of the country where oil and gas development is growing, and also with industrial sectors that have a need for new innovation technologies, like utilities. I know we have a number of utility panelists today that will be speaking a little bit later. And I'm pleased to announce that our next Energy Business Summit is scheduled for November 29th. This is going to be held in Houston, and we've partnered with the Houston Minority Supplier Development Council. This summit will focus on supply chain opportunities, both in the oil and gas sector, pipelines, utilities, and in the LNG supply chains. We worked closely with industry to identify strategic opportunities for businesses that will support their needs, and the sessions will provide important opportunities for businesses to network and to meet senior procurement managers. Our office has also develops tools and resources for businesses and diverse communities. We just recently completed a community benefits agreement toolkit. This toolkit provides information to communities on how to use major energy infrastructure development that is happening in your community as a driver to create workforce partnerships and supplier partnerships. This toolkit really resulted from some of our work in Southwest Louisiana, where we have a regional partnership and are working with the local mayor, a community college, and the local chamber of commerce to develop workforce partnerships and supply chain partnerships for local businesses and community members related to an LNG facility that's being built in the community and a petrochemical facility. Both of these facilities during the construction phases will create thousands of jobs. So we've been working with the local community to develop opportunities so local residents can be trained and also hired for the construction phase and also the permanent phase of the development of those facilities. The community benefit agreement provides resources on how other communities that have energy infrastructure being built in their neighborhoods, being built in their backyards, can begin to have discussions with industry to build similar partnerships. This resource is now available and posted on our website. It consists of a guide and also a frequently asked questions document. And we will be providing some webinars in the future and also working with some of the DOE partner organizations to help get the word out on this resource. Another project that we're working on is we've partnered with the National Utilities Diversity Council to develop a utility workforce diversity toolkit. And we're working, the NUDC is leading these efforts. We've created a task force with the Edison Electric Institute. I see Tyra here earlier. API is also on the task force, and also a number of utilities. This toolkit will document the current state of diversity in the utility industry. It'll also provide best practices on how to recruit and retain a diverse workforce, and I think most importantly, provide a forecast of utility workforce needs by region. So this will be an online resource. It'll be, I think, by state, so you'll be able to go on and look at each state and look at the data in terms of diversity of workforce, utility workforce in that state, and then looking at the forecast for what is going to be anticipated in the future. Also, I think lastly, I just want to mention that our office has been gathering information about hurricane recovery resources, and we've been distributing this to our stakeholders. So we currently have an electronic distribution list that businesses can sign up for, and we periodically send out information on business resources, funding opportunities, and technical assistance opportunities. And because we've been working closely with our partner in Houston for this upcoming event. Our Energy Summit was scheduled for the first week of September. We had to reschedule that because of Hurricane Harvey. And so we've been gathering information for businesses on recovery relief efforts. So the SBA currently has a disaster relief program that businesses who were impacted by the hurricane can apply for. They also are providing for deferment. So businesses that already had an SBA loan but were impacted by the hurricane could apply to the SBA to defer their loan payments. Also this week, the SBA just announced that it needs additional help to provide this technical assistance to businesses, and so they are currently recruiting temporary help. And so you can look at SBA's disaster assistance website. If you know of anyone that is looking for a temporary job, they have about 7 categories of jobs that they're recruiting for, and are really trying to get people on board immediately so they can continue to provide technical assistance. And finally, our Office of Electricity at the Department of Energy has been the clearinghouse at Department of Energy for our hurricane relief efforts. DOE is currently working with national trade associations to provide almost daily situational reports on the impacts the hurricanes have had on the energy infrastructure. So you can look at the Office of Electricity and their website for current resources, not only from DOE, but from other government agencies as well. And I think just to wrap this up, I'd like to just say that there are countless opportunities in the energy sector, and I'm very excited about these opportunities, especially for diverse communities, and commend organizations like this that are leading efforts in outreach and education to communities about what these opportunities are. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Karen listed a wide range of programs and resources that are available, and we can all learn more on the DOE website, which I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is at www.energy.gov? Okay, so www.energy.gov, excuse me, if you have an interest in any of the programs and resources that the U.S. Department of Energy offers. Next, I'd like for us to welcome Ms. Josephine Wapakabulo, who is the CEO of the Ugandan National Oil Company. Josephine, please come.
Good morning. I'm still a bit jet lagged. I'm on Ugandan time. But first I'd like to, she's not here, but thank the Congresswoman. I actually met her on a visit she did about a month ago to Uganda, and that's when we had a conversation about the work that we're doing at the National Oil Company, and she mentioned this great event that was going to be happening, and I jumped at the chance to be part of it. So thank you to her and all the distinguished guests. I'm just going to give a few remarks on the international perspective of energy. I know there's a lot of people here probably more versed than me in energy. My background is oil and gas, defense, aerospace, a few areas, predominantly in Europe and Australia. I moved back to Uganda 2 years ago, mainly to go home, but also looking for opportunities to bring my skill set and also make a difference. And one area that's really changing for Uganda is we've discovered oil and gas. The oil and gas sector is growing. I was employee number 1 for the National Oil Company, the first woman to ever do that apparently anywhere in the world. And so we're growing, which is excellent. So it's a good sign that sort of Africa and women are leading the way on this. And it's a growing sector, but I just thought I'll start with a broader view and then bring you down to where we are in Uganda regarding energy. So I'm going to throw out a few statistics, which sometimes are so big we don't always relate to them, but I think it will help drive the importance of this issue, particularly minority communities, communities of color. So there was a World Energy Outlook report last year that said that 1.2 billion people still do not have access to electricity in the world today. 1.2 billion. And of that 1.2 billion, 95% are in sub-Saharan Africa and developing parts of Asia. So it is a real issue, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. It's mainly in the rural areas. And we know that the impact of not having electricity is broader than just lighting. It's food, it's cooking, it's education, because children need to read at night, and eyesight is not helped when you're looking at a small candle. It's hospitals, it's health. So it's central to so many basic needs that, for me personally, and obviously for everyone in this room, the idea of energy is, yes, there's the business side, we want to make money, but equally from a sort of developing perspective, it is so central to so many issues that need to be addressed. And one of the things, for example, in Uganda, if you look at our energy mix, 90% of the energy that we do have is still biomass driven, and that is charcoal. So it's trees being cut, being put on a stove to cook, to light, to eat. And again, that has environmental impact. It's not sustainable. We have a growth rate in Uganda of 3 to 4% a year, a lot of babies. And so if we continue at that rate of growth and consumption of trees, it's just not environmentally sustainable. So addressing the energy issue becomes more stark when you also look at what is available and what we need to move to. Currently, we have about 8%, which is driven by electricity, and 2%, which is driven by the petrochemical industry. And we're trying to shift that. Uganda is fortunate to have a lot of lakes and rivers, so we're driving hydropower, we're looking at renewable energy efficiencies. But, just going back to the issue of using real sort of wood and trees, that also has a life impact. So one of the studies, again, that came out of this energy outlook is 2.5 billion people still rely on this biomass, very rudimentary way of getting energy and electricity. And out of that, 3.5 million people die a year because of accidents. A house burns down, someone leaves a candle going. So there's also life impact. So what I'm looking forward to in this panel is, the importance of working together as communities, both here in the States, but also in Africa, and working together to look at energy broader than lighting, warmth and heat, but the real link that it has to health, education, sustainability, livelihood. And as we address this, we'll see more opportunities. So, it's a challenge, but I think challenges are opportunities, not things to be down on. And I think the more we work together, we can address this challenge, which is why I'm so passionate about the oil and gas sector in Uganda. Over the next 4 years, we have to invest $15 to $20 billion to develop the oil fields. We're building a refinery, a crude pipeline, storage terminals, and also some product pipelines. Our GDP is at about $24 billion, so you can see the proportion that this investment will do in terms of shift and economic growth. So development of the energy sector, particularly the area that I'm familiar with, sub-Saharan Africa, can have huge impact. But that's also investment opportunities for people beyond Africa. So looking for investor partners, people with experience in the sector to come in and work with us, looking at innovative renewable energy forms so that we can drive the whole sector, not just in oil and gas, which will, drive employment, bring good things. We need to look broader. And I'm hopeful and excited that as we share ideas and we talk about these ideas today through the panel and follow-on discussions, we'll appreciate more that international role that we can all play to develop this sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine, I'm sorry. 1.2 billion. I think that's something that we should all take with us as we think about what it would mean for those of us who have power to not have it. How would our lives be different? And then think about 1.2 billion people, 95% of whom are in sub-Saharan Africa, 95% of whom look like us, are living that way. And so I would suggest that we all have an obligation to do what we can to fix what is clearly a massive problem. So thank you so much for your comments. Next, we have Governor Henry Dixon. He is the governor of the Bayelsa State. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and Governor Dixon has a really great presentation to share with us. So we're gonna have him, I'm gonna ask you guys to focus on the screen over there to my left, and he's going to give us his presentation, and then we're gonna really start our conversation. Governor?
Thank you.
Okay. Is this, that's your presentation?
No, but I will just be speaking. Thank you very much. Let me, first of all, appreciate Congresswoman Jackson Lee, even though she's not here, and her team for. Oh, she's here? Oh, thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you. Thank you. You are here in person. That's the more reason I should continue to thank you. Thank you again for inviting me to this interactive forum, which I consider very important. I'm here, just like unlike the immediate past speaker, Josephine, I'm not an oil and gas expert. For the past over 10 years, I've been involved in managing issues, but from the point of view of political service. I've been elected twice into Nigeria's parliament, and now twice elected as governor of Nigeria's state, the state that has more oil and gas reserves in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, you can't talk about the story of oil and gas in Nigeria without talking about my state. It's actually called Bayelsa, the greatest state in Nigeria. That's where the story of Nigerian oil and gas started, 1956-58. So for Uganda, and Madam, you can come to Bayelsa to learn from us in terms of the consequences of being part of the energy economy. Our relationship for the past 61 years has been the primary place where investments have really taken place. In this area has been the good, the bad, and the ugly, ranging from environmental issues to issues of lack of proper enforcement of international standards by the international oil companies. And Karen, these are areas that I think there should be greater global collaboration, because in the end, the environment is our common heritage. There's no Bayelsa environment, there's no Nigerian environment, there's only environment for the whole world. And I keep saying that what is going on in my state, which we have experience about for the past 61 years, is simply speaking environmental terrorism. That's what is going on in my state and in all other states of the Niger Delta. And that's why you have some of these historical issues. I just hope that Josephine and those of you in Uganda do not have the kind of experience that we have in this regard. And so again, I'm here to call for greater collaboration by all those who are involved in the oil and gas industry. Major oil companies, some of them owned by investors from here, and also let me use this opportunity also to call on the governments of leading nations like the United States to be more involved in protecting our common heritage, which is the environment. Very often I say that if Shakespeare were alive, probably today he would have paraphrased what he said several centuries ago when he said, hell hath no fury compared to the anger of a woman scorned, or something to that effect. But I think that we're actually living in denial and treating the environment with scorn. And I just hope that we don't begin to, in a more catastrophic way than we already know, reap the fruits of that neglect. But back home in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in my state, in my country, in our region, we're dealing with a lot of these issues of environmental degradation and the lack of effective compliance with international standards. We see what happens when there's a spill in the Gulf of Mexico, see a lot of things, and the care that is taken for the environment. And so you don't see those standards back home. I'm not saying all the blame should be put on the oil majors and on multinational institutions. back home, I also know that there's a challenge of the integrity of national institutions and sometimes even of regulatory mechanisms. But again, these are all issues that I believe working together we can address more. But in spite of all of these, the downsides, I think that it's been exciting, to be involved, to be serving a state that has been at the forefront of the oil and gas experience in my country. As I said in Houston, and I say this everywhere, that if you say Houston is the oil capital of the world, so to speak, there's no doubt that my state is the oil and gas capital of Africa, because that's where major discoveries since 1956 up till now have been made, and that was what launched my country first to regional strength and prominence, and then to continental, and playing also the kind of roles that my country, and we are pleased that we have made that possible, but we also need collaboration and support and understanding in addressing some of these challenges. But moving forward, I think as Karen talked about, there's a shift away from hydrocarbon-based sources of energy. But in my state, we have the highest deposits even of that. We have the highest deposits of oil and gas in Bayelsa. Right now, there's a particular field, gas field owned by Shell, that produces over 1.2 billion scf of gas on a daily basis. And that's just scratching the surface. That tells you the potentials there are in my state. In the end, I think the duty, the responsibility of those of us who manage, who are in charge of political leadership in communities that produce, and this will be useful also for our friends in Uganda that are just joining the league, is that I think that from day one, we in my country, we made that mistake. We're trying to go around correcting it. Unfortunately, the country is in a recession because of the global, fall in the prices of oil. But I hope that countries like Uganda that are joining do not make the mistakes we made. Part of what I think has to be done is to utilize oil revenues to create the basis, lay the foundation for a safer economy, expanding the scope of economy. That's why in my state, for the past close to 6 years that I have been governor, we've been using our resources, even in spite of the recession, to invest in the areas that can create a new sustainable economy, investing in education, building schools, making it compulsory for children to get the right kind of education, investing in skills development, because they are going to inherit and be participants in a more globally competitive environment, which wasn't the focus before. And that's why you have challenges, security challenges. That's why you have all those kinds of issues. And it's almost something you find in communities that are producing oil. Again, I hope that's something that those that are joining the league will get to do from day one. In my state, we've built more schools than most states. When I took over as governor in 2012, in all national exams, my state was rated 26, 28. And by the way, my country has 36 states, plus the Federal Capital Authority that is also regarded as a state. So 37 were 28, 26, 28 out of 37. Last year in WAEC, by WAEC, the regional exam body's rating, we were number 6. Yes. Yes. And this year, the assessment that was released just 2 months ago, we were number 5. Yes. Yes. By last week, the national exam body, they call it NECO, brought their latest assessment, and my state was number 3. Yes. So the challenge for managers of economies that are involved in energy, I think quite frankly from our experience, has to be refocusing attention to making investments in education, healthcare, expanding agricultural opportunities, and building infrastructure that can lay the foundation for an emerging, safer, more inclusive, and in the end, more sustainable economy. I have members of my team are here. Professor Nasidi is one of Nigeria's greatest experts in the area of disease control and management. He handled our response, our national response on Ebola, containing Ebola. Now, I appointed him as a consultant to build the best center for prevention of diseases, infectious disease control, and so on. That's our contribution to global health security. So the point I'm making is that emphasis has to be on utilization, proper utilization of oil revenues for investments in education, healthcare, expanding agricultural opportunities, and building infrastructure. In my state, even in these very difficult times, we are building the biggest airport. There was none in my state. We are building schools where there were none. There was no single boarding school when I took over. But now we are building boarding schools, and we have launched what by every account has been described as the most revolutionary educational intervention in my country. Not only have we built schools, we have made it free, all the schools free. We take the children as young as 8, 9, when they finish elementary schools, and then give them scholarships to the boarding schools we have built. And they are fed free 3 times a day. School uniforms are provided free. Books are provided free. And I think that is the way to go for communities like us and Uganda now joining, and that have this. Because there's something known as the cost, the oil cost. And I hope that cup should pass over Uganda. We are drinking, we have taken enough of our share, we've learned the hard way. The High Commissioner of Ghana is here. They have also, in a way, just joined, but they are close enough to smell and feel the oil cost that has ravaged my country for the past 61 years, trying to make amends. So my message to you all is a message of understanding and collaboration, and that we all need to work together to address some of these challenges. I talked about the challenge of environment. I talked about the need for people managing resources to focus on the key areas that can lay the basis for a more inclusive and sustainable economy of the future. But I want to also talk briefly about the opportunities that are still there. We have, as I said, in the whole of Nigeria, if you want oil and gas industry, you come to Bayelsa. And so the whole state is full of gas and oil. We have some acreages. We're looking for partners. Because I believe that governments really should have very little business in doing business. Having invested in these areas, having invested in security, by every account, my state is one of the most peaceful and stable, even in the Niger Delta region, because of the investments we have made. Now we are calling on the investing public. Let me, in passing, and this is a point I wanted Congresswoman Jackson Lee to, and I'm happy you're here while I'm making this point. I came primarily to make the point that we in Africa, and certainly I from Bayelsa and in Nigeria, would like to see greater involvement and participation of Africans in the diaspora. That's what some of us refer to people of color here. We feel that's your base, and you're talking of a continent of 1.2 billion human beings. But if you look at the level of economic activity, there's not much to show for it. You've got the Chinese coming in, you've got others coming in. Meanwhile, people just stay and most probably sometimes get discouraged because of the negative propaganda out there. But there's a lot going on, a lot of good stories, like what you've heard about my state, and there are several other such good stories. So we still remain a continent of opportunities. 3 days ago, your president said, and I think he was right on this. I agree with him on this. When he said he has a couple of friends who said they were running to Africa to invest to get rich. And Karen will agree with me that there are indeed a lot of opportunities, great, wonderful opportunities. In my state, if you're looking for investments in oil and gas, you come to Bayelsa. If you're looking for any kind of investment in agriculture, in infrastructure building, we're building a big port, we're building an airport, as I talked about. We're building the best public healthcare facilities in Nigeria, in my state. The best health institutions, now public, are in my state. And there are a whole range of investment opportunities that I think people of color, our brothers and sisters, should be made aware of so that they can take advantage of this. So I want to once again round up by thanking Congresswoman Jackson Lee for this opportunity, and let me also appreciate you and all your colleagues for the wonderful work that you're doing, keeping this platform going as it is. It's a very important platform for all of us. And I'm proud, I'm happy to be associated with you. I would like to take some few questions and hopefully have some exciting preliminary discussions. I came here with a team that is strong enough and complete to close deals. If there's anyone here looking out for any deals, and the best oil deals, the best deals in gas, the best deals in the area of power, supply of power. My dear sister talked about it. Converting gas, abundant gas resources to power. All of that is only possible in my state. And we have a government that understands our responsibilities to create a safe operating environment, and a government that understands the role of the private sector, and a government that is here now inviting your participation. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the audience. God bless you.
So now,
Okay.
I would like to invite the Congresswoman, Sheila Jackson Lee, to come up. Is that okay? And offer us some of your remarks and comments and thoughts. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Was it going now?
Glover, thank you so very much. It's a pleasure. Governor, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Now, anybody who is engaged in energy, the environment, power, has to be a little bit livelier than that. So if you cannot clap for me, you can clap for yourselves, and it can look like you are alive and you are ready to be empowered. I want to take an opportunity for a few thank yous and express my appreciation to long-standing collaborators, which are the American Association of Blacks in Energy. And every time I get in front of a podium and begin to calculate age, and I've been with something for a long time, people's eyes start rolling in the back of their head, mother, and they start trying to calculate, how old is she? But let me be very clear that I was one of the near founding members of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. and was well aware when Mickey Leland created the Energy Brain Trust with some of us babies that were in the energy industry at that time. And it was in the last century. And so for those of you who want to know how strong the American Association of Blacks in Energy, they started in the last century and they're still going. And they started when African Americans were not known to be engaged in the energy industry. So I will answer your questions, and I promise that I will not stay wedded to my notes, because I look forward to the panel. So let me do this housekeeping. First of all, what a privilege to be able to welcome you as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, of which I have had this Energy Brain Trust since I came to the United States Congress, following Mickey Leland and my predecessor. And so this Brain Trust is going into its 30th year plus, and we're excited about that. I want to acknowledge the sponsors, Atmos Energy. Thank you for sponsoring this session. Where is Atmos? Stand up, please. Thank you. It's good to make new friends, is it not? We're delighted. I hope that you will find this beneficial and that you will be back again and again and again. Let me also say to the governor, and that's what I'm going to spend my time sort of responding to the very good framework that you and my dear sister from Uganda, Josephine, where are you, the minister? I was so excited. Please stand up. We met just a few months ago in Africa. We stood at a reception. We were put together by the U.S. Embassy. I looked her in the eye and said, you need to be in Washington, D.C. And I think she is the keen example of what the governor is saying. So Dale, you're going to help me next year, because next year we're going to merge this session with private equity persons. My district has the largest percentage of private equity. They're hiding in covers across America, making their own independent decisions. And we need them, a finite small amount are African Americans, but they're there, to understand what the raging opportunities are on the continent for Nigeria, which is, as they say, a almost senior citizen. They have been in this business for a long time, but they are getting renewed opportunities. And when you see Governor Dixon, a different attitude. Let the funding go and the resources benefit the people, build the infrastructure, and have a thriving energy industry that benefits the people of Nigeria. So there's a new opportunity. And then who would have ever thought Uganda and Rwanda, surrounding areas. And this, if I might say, young woman, trained in London, is now the minister. Who would have ever thought 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago? They are your contemporaries.
Check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
And they have a new attitude.
1, 2.
About real estate, Mr. Womack. About connecting to the United States, Ms. Hebron. And what are we doing? Watching Maria devastate the power grid in Puerto Rico. Energy should be thought of not as an afterthought, but as a keen and important part of survival around the world. Around the world. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, and there will be an amazing need for reformation and restoration during that time frame, or during the restoration of Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands. All of them are devastated. The grid, one of the issues that we need to discuss, and I'm always thinking, as they say, if God spares your life, but you think ahead of time, the power grid has got to be discussed by us. And we've got to be a part of getting these power companies, in this instance, Governor Dixon, you need the utility system that works, because you can have the energy and no one has got lights. And And what we have are energy companies. Let's appreciate who they are. They're business people, and we've said over and over again, you've got to go underground. You've got to do something to protect the infrastructure. So what did Puerto Rico have? What does Florida have? What does Texas have? What's in my backyard? A big old wooden stick with the wires on it, mixed in with the trees. And so if something goes awry, I was hunkered down on Hurricane Harvey, because I knew that if any wind, we had water, so thank goodness the water came after me. But if any manner of wind with the number of trees that we have in Texas and in Houston, and if I might say 30 or so on my lot, that I love, but any one of them in all of the neighborhood, we were flooded out, but we would have been roofed out, and we would have been collapsed out, and we would have looked like Puerto Rico. And all of our grid would be down because they're above ground and they're not protected. I thank my staff for my presentation, but I'm off to text. I've joined the crowd at 1600 Pennsylvania. I got Dale laughing. But I do want to thank Mr. Womack and Ms. Hebram. I want to thank Shashrina Thomas, who's en route. Thank my staff. And I want to acknowledge the World Youth Foundation. I think some of you are here. Very glad to see you. Thank you so very much. Stand up. Thank you. They've always got good questions. Thank you, Ms. Franklin. I want to acknowledge Mr. Carr has come for the first time, and he's doing debris removal down in Texas, and I'm amazed that he's even able to lift his head up, removing that debris. I want Reverend Taylor to stand. I think I saw him here. He was impacted by the storm. I know he was in the house at the time, Reverend Taylor. His church has been devastated. He's coming up here to get knowledge. He's going to be at the meet and match. Church was devastated. He had to boat out or get out. Some of his senior citizens, they're not going to be able to come back to their homes for a long period of time. We have been impacted by Hurricane Harvey. I know what's going on in Florida, and I know what's going on with Hurricane Marie. And all of that involves energy. So let me highlight a few points. I really do mean to answer the fact that there is a need for capital. That's what it is. We must match these resources with capital. When the president came, I just came back from Africa. I try to go a couple of months. I could be there 6 months out of the year, but I do represent the 18th Congressional District. So I'm there at long periods of time, as long as I can. And we did, I think, 6 countries this last time opportunity to be there, to a country, Madagascar, who had not seen a congressional delegation for a decade, maybe. That's what happens. And certainly Madagascar is one that can really welcome this cross-pollination that you're talking about, even from the continent, because obviously they're out in the water. Yeah. And so there needs to be more cross-pollination of Madagascar, Mr. President, Mr. Governor, because they're Africa. Yeah. And they are looking up for the needs that they have. One of our persons that I met there was Symbian Oil, and they have now restored an existing plant. There is much room under President Obama's concept of Power Africa. And that was the last trip with him that we went, to be able to foster this whole concept of powering Africa. Now, when I say that, that does not diminish the work that we must do in the United States, or the cross-pollination that we must do. So when we talk about the economy and communities of color, what I would like to be able to do is to ensure that this session talks about the tools and how we use the tools. The Energy Brain Trust is very pleased to ensure that we continue these kinds of discussions at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And so sidebar conversations are STEM education, which the energy industry should be supporting. In addition, we should be having more regular discussions. This is a once-a-year discussion. I know that there are sessions across the world. There is, of course, the session, the Offshore Technology Conference, where so many come, but I don't know whether there's a real opportunity for people of color to be in rooms and to really strike deals. And I'm allowed to say this because none of them I will benefit from, that will create jobs in our community. And that's what I've always seen energy as, a source of life and livelihood from the perspective of what energy does, but also the fact that we must continue our commitment to STEM education so that we can build a generation of nuclear scientists and petroleum engineers and owners of companies, creators of jobs, environmentalists, individuals who know that you can mix the energy resources with an environmental footprint. I've never run away from the environment, and I don't run away from my votes on the floor of the House when I know that the industry is wrong. Because we can live and in coexistence with that. So we did not need to have a burnout of an H2O chemical plant in Texas because the chemical plant refused to comply with regulations fostered by the Obama administration after the West Texas chemical burn that we had some years ago. And so after Hurricane Harvey, all the firefighters could do is stand back, evacuate for 1.5 miles, and watch it burn, and hope and pray that the corridor of chemical plants would not burn alongside. Because what happened is the power went out, and the chilling factor that kept it at the temperature that would not allow it to combust. Oh, watch it, Sheila, now. It's your bad self. Anyhow, I just want y'all to have a little humor. I'm going to end my remarks in a moment. Would not catch fire, and it did, because we did not have the power to do what we needed to do. So I wanted to just provoke thought today. Governor Dixon, I want, as we continue in the 21st century, to move the brain trust to the points of coming together for solutions, and to encourage those who are not from the continent to visit and to see opportunities of which we can generate a great deal of answers to your questions. I'd like to see the energy industry on the continent generate the GNP, but as well, I'd like to see the benefits grow to the people of that particular country, and to build the continent. And so to connect energy, you should not have to, if I might, leave Ghana and go to Europe, I'm just using an example, to get to Nigeria. If you build the mutual economies, then you can have the mutual transportation system that allows that economy to build on the continent and do business, as well as we in the United States coming that way. So I'm going to close by thanking the panelists, and I did not follow script, do not blame my staff. It's a lot of long pages here. I just wanted to offer some thoughts. As a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I do want to make mention of my commitment and concern on energy security, and that is securing the assets that we have. And I'm so glad the Honorable is here, that she will, as coming off of FERC, that she will offer those thoughts. I think we are all very vulnerable, and I think you're well aware of the discourse that is going on with the leaders of the United States, none of which I condone, and North Korea, as late as this morning. And so nuclear is an energy source, but as well, it is a source of war. We should be able to ensure that that we have a sort of a framework, a matrix of securing our security energy security sources, or our energy should be secured. I've always been troubled by that as a member of the Homeland Security Committee. I don't think we're where we need to be. And when we did get where we needed to be, Governor, we were, of course, thwarted by those who want no regulation. And so don't take a lesson from those who are here in the United States who believe that they are most effective when there's no regulation. I think you can do very well with a structure in government, and I do want to compliment you for what you have done in your state in looking out for the people. I want to thank you for that, and we want to be a partner in all that you have suggested that we need to do. We want to be a partner, and I hope that maybe you'll be able to return next year, and we will have sessions dealing with the investors. And as I said, doesn't have to wait for a year, but we want to be part of that, making sure that we translate our words into deeds, and that you grow a young population of energy specialists, and we're still growing a population of energy specialists. And I think that will put us on the pathway of success. I did not want to miss, because I saw when I said his great state of which I studied in, went to school at the University of Accra and Kumasi in Ghana, and so I wanted to acknowledge the ambassador from the Republic of Ghana, the ambassador to the United States. I'm delighted. It's a good friend, and we thank you so very much for your service to the nation. And may I add, we have our friends from Nigeria, but I went to school there in Ibadan. But I do want to thank you for the steady, peaceful hand and transition of government that Ghana has had. And I hope there are people that are young enough to not know what age this was when I said that when you brought the body home of Nkrumah, I was there. Okay? So let's just say I was in my mother's arms. But you will know that I was there because I was amazed that everyone had red. And in the United States, we wear black. And I was amazed to see the brilliant red color as they brought his body home. Again, the calculation is such that she was in her mother's arms. Let me also, I want to acknowledge, you all are going to come up, but I just want to thank Jerome Rimgo. Let me thank you very much for being here. You're going to be on the panel. The Honorable Colette Arnable, she is formerly a commissioner of the FERC. I'm delighted to have her. And Charles Rice, President and CEO of Entergy, New Orleans. We're delighted to have you. Carl Weber, Director, Atmos Energy. You were just introduced. And we will have the wonderful ambassador as well. I will go to my seat. Let me thank all of you for listening to these notes that I've offered to you, but these are my thoughts and commitment to all of you, and hope and look forward to a very positive session. Thank you all so very much. Welcome to the 47th Annual Legislative Conference. Please come back again. I do want to acknowledge my good friend, Dr. Keith McGee. Would you stand up, please? Dr. Keith McGee flew in from London, and I think it's always worthy to acknowledge a MacArthur recipient. You all Google that. He is a MacArthur recipient. He is still in the middle of his grant or his activities. Let me not say grant. He's in the middle of his activities. Stand up again. And we're delighted with his very important work. Thank you. Those are Genius Awards, by the way. Thank you so very much. I'll hand it over to the best moderator, and you will now take over. Thank you, as CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy, for all you do to continue the presence of African Americans in this very important sector. Thank you so very much.
So I'm going to invite our panelists to come up and join us on the stage. We've already heard, I think, a lot to ask questions about, But if you have questions, I'll just remind you, feel free to come here into the middle. We are going to do somewhat of a bit of a lightning round so that we can endeavor. We're not going to get out on time because I do want us to have a discussion, but we'll be close. So with that, can I invite the Honorable Colette Honorable, come on up to the stage. Mr. Jerome Ringo, please come up to the stage. Jerome is President and CEO of Zoetic Global. Mr. Ambassador, please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but I'm going to make an attempt. Dr. Barfor Ajay Barua, who's Ambassador for the Republic of Ghana. Ms. Josephine Wapakabulo, the CEO of the Uganda National Oil Company.
Ambassador, you're welcome.
Excuse me. Thank you. Mr. Charles Rice Jr., President and CEO of Entergy New Orleans. Mr. Carl Weber, Director at Atlas Energy. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Dale Lefebvre. So please welcome all of our panelists to the stage. So I am going to start with one question. It's a double-sided question, and then invite each panelist to answer this question. And then I really am going to open up the floor for you to ask questions. We've heard, I think, 3 key themes this morning so far. The importance of collaboration, the importance of opportunity and understanding what the opportunities are for workforce as well as for our business growth. And we've talked a lot about infrastructure and challenges. And so what I'd like for each of you to do is to just share with us first one challenge that you see that the industry faces, and then one opportunity. And you feel free to respond to one another as well, because I think that would be a great way for have a discussion, okay? Governor Dixon, why don't you go first?
And before you do that, let me just acknowledge my chief and my staff who've been running around here and doing a great job.
Glenn.
Okay, I use this.
I think it's just you.
All right, thank you very much. Talking about the challenges are actually many and varied. I think you have the challenges of the environment, as I talked about, because energy enterprise impacts directly on the environment. It's a great deal of interplay with the environment, which we need to pay more attention to, as I said earlier. But far and above that, you also have an overarching problem of democratization of opportunities. What do I mean? In most producing communities like Bayelsa, you don't have opportunities localized in the communities where most of these activities take place. And that's why it's important for societies, for governments, to emphasize on skills development, developing new and modern skills and methods, emphasizing the role of science and technology and research. I think that's also another critical challenge, apart from the challenge of the environment.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador.
Well, I do. Is that okay? I have a big body, but I tend to have a small voice. So if you don't hear, I'm sorry. I believe the critical challenge here has to do with the fact that, especially where we are talking to blacks in the energy industry, the challenge is the ability to attract blacks into the energy sector in most of the African countries. Because somewhere along the line, even though the first law of magnetism says like poles repel, this is one area where like poles will have to attract.
Yeah.
Because if anything at all, the advantage, the pride, and the winning in all this will have to be shared between all peoples of color. The opportunity. is that, for instance, my country is open for business. We would want to support and encourage anybody and everybody who is prepared to come into the industry with good intent. We are not saying that you shouldn't come with the intent of making a profit, but the good intent has to do with the fact that profits may always be made in terms of equitable involvement. And therefore, if there is a challenge, I'm throwing the challenge to those of you who are in the industry and who are black, that come back home and invest. My president said at the UN the other day that we are going to make sure that we do the best we can to revive our economy. So the challenge to you is not essentially to, as it were, leave a tissue of guilt in anybody's mind, but rather to ginger up everybody's enthusiasm to invest in a country that is obviously poised for better things. Thank you.
So I operate an electric and gas utility here in the United States, and it's interesting to hear the ambassador talk about the opportunities that are in Ghana. Well, there are also a lot of opportunities in the United States, and there are opportunities here because the utility industry is really undergoing a transformation. There's a lot of aging infrastructure throughout, not only at my company, but throughout the industry, and there are billions of dollars of investment that are going to need to be made in order to update equipment, in order to build new power plants, to integrate renewables into the system. So here in the US, there are tremendous opportunities also. And there is an issue, even in the US, of making sure we have African Americans who are engaged in our industry. It is still a white male-dominated industry. We've done better, but it's still not anywhere near where it needs to be. So we have the same struggles that they're facing in Ghana, and it's interesting to hear that conversation because we have an issue attracting African Americans to STEM careers also. So there are a lot of opportunities in the US. I would urge each of you to take a good look at the industry, and there are just not a lot of African Americans who are taking advantage of the opportunities because there are a lot of successful African Americans who have retired out of the industry who have a lot of expertise that could be used with people who had the capital to invest.
So I'm going to respond in part focusing on the young people in the back of the room. Hey guys, I'm sitting between 9 billion and 24 billion in terms of market cap between Carl and Charles. Pretty rare thing. You hear numbers that big and you know there's massive opportunity. But today, my company is measured in hundreds of millions, not thousands of millions like these two guys. The opportunity is massive both for ownership, and everyone talks about STEM, but it's also how do we get people who are willing to run an HDD drill and make $250,000 a year? How do we get welders, right? Anybody who is a licensed welder in Atlanta, I can hire tomorrow. And it's just not there because people who look like us don't often have the interface into the industry, and it's a challenge both domestically, locally, et cetera, and then very few of us actually own anything. So my message to you guys is to look at the ownership piece and just the scale of this industry. A big percentage of our GDP is in this industry, and an even bigger percentage of our growth.
You know, there's a point where the conversation changes. It transitions from asking the question, what impact does energy have on the community, to what impact does the community have on energy? From the perspective of our industry, it's in alignment with everything that's been said around the infrastructure redevelopment. We're having difficulty finding qualified people to help us replace our natural gas lines. Yeah. So we're trying to figure out new ways to help businesses start and create a market where the cost is better for us because you have more players out there instead of going to the same 5 or 10 characters nationwide. From the community's perspective, I think the challenge has to deal with questions around affordability, which is key, Like, for example, I always say, if you want to have a conversation around affordable housing, you have to consider the energy mix as a part of that conversation. Buying a home is one thing, but maintaining it and sustaining it is the other, and energy plays a big part of that. There's a reliability factor. There's the efficiency factor, making sure that it's effective. It has the least amount of impact on the environment. So I see it as like two different challenges from two different directions, and it's going to require both us as an industry and the community to sit down and talk about those challenges and work out what's going on, because what happens to Charles and I in the New Orleans area may be different than another part of this country or the world for that matter, but the conversation has to take place.
So where I've identified a big challenge in my role, and it's already been touched on, it's on the issue of education and job opportunities. So there's a leaning towards degrees, which has a place, but when you look at the direct employment that's going to come out of our oil and gas sector, it's between 10 to 15,000 people in a population of 40 million. Where the real value is, and sustainable value in terms of skill sets that can traverse oil and gas and go into other sectors, is more vocational skills. But we have a challenge where everyone wants a degree. And multiple degrees. And I'm saying this as someone who has 4 degrees and a PhD, so it's a bit ironic. But there is a place for degrees. We do need that skill. But I lived and worked in Germany for quite a while, where vocational training and skill set is so respected and appreciated. And there's a reason their economy is so strong. And it's generational. You'd see fathers, grandfathers, young people, they're all training to be and they're proud. And they love it, and they go for it. And that is something I see as a big gap, where we have thousands of young people with oil and gas degrees, because we've taken a while to develop our sector, so everyone ran and but not everyone is going to be employed. But you will always get a job for a welder. You will always get a job for someone with a vocational skill. So I see that as a big gap and a challenge and a mindset change, that there's a place for degrees, but we need to start appreciating and putting value and paying well for those vocational skills that go beyond the sector, that will get more people employed, that will be transferable to other sectors, and more beneficial. So it's a challenge, but an opportunity as well.
Good morning. I'm Colette Honorable. I'm a partner at Reed Smith. It's a global firm of 1,700 lawyers. So the energy work that we carry out each and every day is global in nature. My work, as the Congresswoman mentioned, and let me pause to first acknowledge the Congresswoman, first of all, for inviting me back for another of her incredible brain trusts, but more importantly for the leader she has been and will continue to be, regardless of whether it's popular or not, to speak as a powerful woman to powerful people about how decisions that are made each and every day impact her people and our people. So I have to say that first in acknowledging her. As she mentioned, I served as previously a state regulator, but most recently commissioner at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So when the Congresswoman mentions the electricity grid, in that role I oversaw the electricity grid along with my colleagues. So I'd like to touch very quickly, thank you, Madam President Glover, for the opportunity, on challenges and opportunities that we have in this sector. First of all, as you've heard from my colleagues on this panel, we do not yet fully appreciate the impact of energy globally on people of color and in communities of color. On a positive note, how much capital is literally moving through your communities. You have no idea about that. We collectively don't have any idea about that. And as you just heard, this money changes lives. When you heard this powerful woman speak about the jobs that she is bringing to bear as a leader, these are not minimum wage positions. And these jobs have the ability to impact generations of wealth. On the negative side, we do not appreciate the impact of energy and world forces in the energy sector. Lest you think that climate change is not real, turn on the television. Around the world, we are seeing unprecedented weather events, temperature rising. Now, Jerome can speak to this more than I can. And how weather events are impacting everyday people. So we can pay attention to not, but these dollars are being spent and allocated, and these world forces are taking place around us. And so it's imperative that we are part of that. It's imperative that we engage with regulators, with members of Congress, and with policymakers to make sure that they are aware of how these decisions are impacting them. Not on the side of a meeting, in the record, in the proceeding, so that there is a record of how this is done. There is an opportunity for us. I want to acknowledge the World Youth Foundation. These men and women are very special to me. I met them through Congresswoman Jackson Lee. I was with you guys. I see some familiar faces. Last, I think, summer, had a great time with them. Let me tell you something about these young people. They have the ability to change the world. When I went and met with these young people, an 8-year-old young man asked me about cybersecurity. They are leaning in, and they are thirsty and eager to take part in this. They're willing to do the hard work. And it's important that we in the energy sector connect with them so that they can see us. As the saying goes, you can't be what you can't see. So they need to see us. I'm so proud of the leadership that continues to bring them, and it's important that we, as ABE, as NARUC, I think the woman from DOE referenced our work with regard to supplier diversity and creating that toolkit that is now on websites so that you can check and see. That was established through NARUC, through the NUDC, during particularly launching the technological portion of that during my time as president of NARUC. We need to continue to carry out this work to spread the message about how these matters, as you've heard, which contain millions and billions of dollars, are impacting us and how we can be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and my wonderful colleagues have touched on a lot of what would be my answer to the challenges. Just 2 weeks ago, I made my 62nd trip to Africa in the last 3 years. I was in Ghana. I traveled with members of the Golden State Warriors basketball team. And we went to Accra. We were at the University of Ghana at Legon and held a basketball camp. And what we did, Zoetic Energy is my company, we sponsored the event so that we could teach young people basketball, identify some super basketball players, 2 of which we were given scholarships and on their way to the United States to play basketball. But we also use each break in the camp to educate people on climate, entrepreneurship, leadership, whatever. Of about 300 kids, I took the climate and the environmental section of the conversations. I asked 300 kids, how many of you know anything about global warming? These were high school kids, middle school kids. Out of the 300 kids, there were only 2 that had a clear understanding of climate change, global warming, and the impacts. We're talking about communities that are impacted disproportionately by climate issues, communities that are part of that 1.2 billion people who have no electricity, communities that are part of the 850 million people who have no clean water, but they don't have a clear understanding of climate. It was not a reflection of their intelligence or lack of, because they're very intelligent people. What it told me was that there's there's a gap in the education system where young people are not being taught in the schools, and the schools are not focusing primarily on those issues that disproportionately impact their lives in the biggest way. So when we talk about challenges, I think that as American investors, we should, one, make sure, Donald Trump made the statement yesterday that his friends go into Africa to make money. That's crazy. And the bottom line is yes, they will make money, but the bottom line is we can no longer make African people casualties of our investment. We must make sure that the African people be the beneficiary of our investment. So the challenge is to get universities, high schools, throughout the education programs to start training Africans on being the researchers, the developers, the maintenance people on all, especially renewable energy projects that we're bringing to those countries. If we're going to bring in solar systems into the countries, if we're going to bring in hydrokinetic systems into the country, Africans should be trained on operating these systems. We should not, as American companies, be hauling in just Americans, as the Chinese have done, to take the jobs from the African people and take the money back to their countries. So we have a responsibility. It is incumbent upon us as American investors that we not only bring the technology into the countries, but we also bring mechanisms to help educate the people of those countries to do the jobs and work the projects of which we have invested in those countries.
Thank you. I would like to say something. Can I? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, moderator. I would just like to intervene at this point and say one or two things to support the views already expressed by the CEO of the Ugandan National Oil Company. She made a case for training and skills development. And I don't know whether we're both suffering from the same colonial heritage, because while you were explaining your situation, I mean, you were actually explaining what is going on in my country as well. As you rightly said, degrees are good. I mean, you have a PhD. I trained as a lawyer. It's good. There will always be room for lawyers and people who have PhDs to be teaching in universities and undertaking research. But I think that in Africa, particularly, we need to focus more on skills development, development of middle-level manpower, technical capacity, which is completely absent in my country, and we're paying dearly for it. I don't know what the situation in our neighboring country, Ghana, is, but I have a view that in my state, that's a very serious challenge. It's also so in the whole country as a whole. And that's why when I received an invitation from the German High Commissioner to speak at the Nigerian-German Business Summit in Frankfurt, I will do so by, I think, Wednesday next week, because of the investments we are making in skills development in my state. I gladly took that opportunity. And you were right. The Germans have done that very well. And that's the more reason they have a very, sustained growth in their economy. And there's what I like to call a democratization of skills and wealth in a very sustainable sense. Sometimes running small companies in family units and in cooperatives and so on, and they've done very well. So the Germans, that is a clear case we all need to learn from. So in societies that are going into energy production, I think we need to focus more on development of technical manpower at the middle level. It's so bad in my country that we can't even have skilled plumbers. It's not just limited to oil and gas industry. You can have good bricklayers who are properly trained, who make a living out of it and do their jobs well. So that's a major, major challenge. Like I said earlier, I don't know if there's some colonial heritage that we are yet to win ourselves completely off. But I think that the time has come for all of us, while emphasizing on the degrees and the universities issuing degrees and so on and so forth, let us also build institutions. In my state, this was why I had to create the University of Africa. University of Africa is a new university that is taking off this year. In 2 months' time, they already have the foundation course going. They've had it going for the past 1 year. And the emphasis will be on agriculture, development of agricultural skills, so that we want to train not just people with degrees and certificates, but people who can, from the universities and with the diplomas and other programs that they run, actually go and run farms. We're setting up a department on oil and gas. I believe when I get to Germany. Those are some of the conversations I would like to have going forward. So the issue our sister Josephine raised about development of skilled manpower, people with practical skills, especially at the middle level. In my country, for example, only they bring people from Italy, the companies like Ajip that runs in my state, young boys and girls with middle-level qualifications, you know, because of their skill set. They come and then assume control and manage and boss over people with degrees and so on. Because in the end, it is the skills that matter in this industry much more than others. So I just thought I should support that view because it's important.
Thank you, Governor. Absolutely.
Well, it looks like the three of us are singing from the same hymn book. I have been a strenuous opposition member of those who were against the fact that the technical institutions we had have been changed into universities. And if I understand changing into universities in our situation is, we had the University of Science and Technology. They produced the first set of traffic lights in Ghana, but the government never supported them producing more. They produced a utility vehicle called Boafo. Boafo means helper. After the first line of production, that was it. For some strange reason, they were not supported, as it were, to do what the university was supposed to do. Now, as a normal university, they are into law, they are into whatever it is that at the moment cannot be considered to be what is most advantageous for us. The technical schools are probably going to end up the same. So we do find that there's a skills match between what the economy is asking for and what education probably is going to provide. For me, my prescription is going to be that if that is going to be the trend, then skew the remuneration to suit those who are doing the jobs that the economy needs to be done. I know engineers, mechanical engineers, who, if they have problems with their vehicles, they take the vehicles to mechanics who cannot even successfully write the word invoice. They've never been to school, but they are very practical and very good. I would have thought that the engineer, rather, would be on the side of this fellow to rectify some of these things. So it is this inverse relationship between the development of our economies and what is it that we are providing. That is the issue. So I suppose we are on the same wavelength, except that maybe the intensities might be different.
Thank you, first of all, Mr. Ambassador. I apologize. We do have to end. There's a session that's actually standing outside waiting to get into this room, and so we want to certainly be sensitive to their time and allow them the space. If our speakers are able to stay around and chat with you, we certainly welcome that. But I want us all to thank all of our speakers and our panelists for spending the morning with us. I certainly appreciate it, and I hope that this really is the beginning of a dialogue so that next year we're not coming back here talking the same thing, saying the same things, dancing the same dance, but that we are showing some real progress. Thank you.